Hi everyone, welcome back. It's me, MiMa Kay. Welcome to the Essence of. Today we're going to be speaking on a certain topic, which is about hearing God's voice. If this is your first time listening, welcome. God bless you. If it's not your first time listening, welcome back. And may God bless you also. Make sure you all just share this with others. You don't know who is this message for, so just share it and God bless you. Also, if you're watching or listening to any of the recent episodes, if you check the links in the bio, it has related sermons, related testimonies that I put in the link, so you can go and watch it and not just hear it from me but also hear it from others. I probably would suggest for you to look at them because they're really good sermons, they're really good testimonies, and they relate to the topic, and some of them can help you understand better than the way that I am trying to help you understand it. So I put things that are related to the topic in the link description, so you can go and check that out. Let's get into it. So today we're going to be on the topic of hearing God's voice. So what is hearing God's voice? To some people who have not heard God's voice, they might think that hearing God's voice is like a really big voice that's like, oh, my daughter or my son, like a deep voice that's very loud. But I want to talk about traits of hearing God's voice, but I'm also going to pinpoint traits of Satan's voice, because we can get those two things confused a lot of the times. But when it comes to hearing God's voice, you never know when you will hear it. But the voice of God is just here to give you wisdom in situation. And God is here to speak to you and for you, but also to speak for others to you. And that's why sometimes you hear people say, oh, God woke me up in the middle of the night to pray for someone, even though I don't know that person, or God told me to go and speak to that person and pray for them. That's what the voice of God is here to do. It's here for wisdom. It's here to help us out. It's here to guide us into prayers. And it's here to help us in every situation that we don't understand. So to hear God's voice, we have to be in his presence. That's where having a relationship with God comes in. Because if you have a relationship with God and you are consistent and you're reading your word, you're praying and you're asking for wisdom and you're asking for the Holy Spirit to guide and lead, and that's where it can lead to you hearing his voice. And that's why we have to take time for God. We have to take quiet times, and sometimes quiet times are very good for us to take, because in those quiet times we find ourselves in his presence. We find ourselves hearing him clearly, and we also find ourselves just knowing what to do, having that sort of guidance with him. But that's why it's important for us as believers to fast, to pray, to read the word, and not just fasting from food, but also sometimes we have to fast away from social medias and like shows and YouTube and things like that, because if we don't have that type of clarity in our lives, we want that clarity, we have to make room for him. We have to make room for him to enter. We have to make room for him to be there with us, because without that room, without making that time, there's no way that we're able to have that sense of clarity, that we're able to be sure that what we're doing is what we're supposed to do. Because sometimes in moments where you are weak, that's where God wants you to really stay with him. Just because you're in your weakest moment, that doesn't mean we have to stay down. You have to get up and get back up again, because in your weakest moments is where you really need God, because in those weakest moments is where your eyes are open, is where you have wisdom. That's where you really need to start hearing God. That's where you need to start obeying God's voice. Some of us, we do hear God's voice, but we don't obey his voice. We don't obey the word. We don't obey what he's telling us to do. We like to go with our own things. And my dad was talking about it yesterday, and he was talking about if you don't obey his voice, if you don't obey his word, we can break that covenant that we have with God. That covenant that we have with God, we can break it. So that's where us as believer, keeping our word, reading our word, fasting and praying and doing all these things just so we have to make time and make room for him. Because in our weakest moments, we have to lean on God. In every weakest moments that we have to lean on God. I want to read a Bible verse that basically talks about it. And it's in 2 Timothy 1:7. And it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power and love and sound of mind." When we read 2 Timothy 1:7, this in 2 Timothy 7, it's Paul. It's talking about how Paul was helping Timothy to overcome the spirit of weakness. And it also relates to Psalms 27:1, where in Psalms 27:1 it says, "The Lord is my light, my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" This is what God has not given us a spirit of fear. God does not give us a spirit of weakness. So when Paul was helping Timothy to overcome that spirit of weakness, he told him that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of sound of mind. So us as believer, just because we are in our weakest moment, that don't mean we stay in that weak moment. We have to lean on God. We have to lean on his voice. We have to lean on his word. We have to pray. We have to fast. In our weakest moment, that is the moment that we're supposed to get in the presence of God, because in our weakest moment is the moment that the devil tries to come and destroy and kill and do all those things that he's trying to do to play with our minds. In our weakest moment is when the devil is really trying to get us to try to think about things that are not even going to happen, things that are not even, that God did not even promise us. He tries to trick us into things that we are not even supposed to be thinking about. In our weakest moment, the devil tries to put fear and make us fearful. But God has not given us a spirit of fear. He has not given us a spirit of weakness. God has given us a spirit of power. He has given us power, love, and sound of mind. I want to talk about 3 traits of hearing God's voice, but I'm also going to put in the traits of hearing Satan's voice, the traits of Satan's voice and traits of God's voice. One of the first traits of hearing God's voice is that there is no fear, which is also pinpointed to 2 Timothy 1:7, where it talks about that God has not given us the spirit of fear. Because God, when you hear his voice, he doesn't come to make you fearful. God is not a God of fear. So when you hear his voice, you shouldn't have fear in you. It's where it leads to the second point, which is God rules by peace. And if you read 1 Corinthians 14:33, it talks about how God rules by peace, which says, "And let the peace of Christ, to which you were also called in one body, rule your heart and be thankful." This talks about the peace of Christ. Allow the peace of God to rule your heart, because God is a peaceful God. He rules by peace. He doesn't rule by dysfunction. He rules by peace. And one of the things that the devil likes to do a lot is accuse. He likes to accuse. And when the devil accuses, don't think that's God. God does not accuse people. He doesn't accuse. And if you read in Revelation 12, it talks about how the devil is an accuser. It says the devil, it calls the devil an accuser. You read in Revelation 12:10, you will see that it calls the devil the accuser of our brothers and sisters. He accuses them before our God day and night and has thrown down. And one thing that the devil likes to do a lot, most of the time, he likes to please the flesh. Most of us as Christians, as believers, we have to know the difference between glorifying God and pleasing the flesh. We cannot feel our spiritual life and also feel the flesh at the same time. Because guess what? The devil can trick you. A lot of people think the devil don't know the word. Guess what? If Satan can talk angels out of heaven, guess what he can do? He can talk you into hell. That's what Satan can do. If he could talk you into pleasing your flesh, he can do more and more. There's more and more that he can do to trick you. So the devil, he likes to please the flesh a lot. You can read Luke chapter 4, verse 6, 7, and 9, where it talks about how the devil likes to please the flesh. But one thing about God, y'all, one thing about him is that he rules. He rules by peace. He gives you internal peace. He gives you internal peace within God. Listen, you will have that internal peace, that peace that's within you, that you will know this is God. God is peaceful. He's peaceful. And one thing about God, he speaks good things. And you can read Philippians 4:8 about it. And it talks about how God speaks good things unto his people. And if God speaks good things unto his people, you should be speaking good things unto others. If you read Ephesians 4:29, it says, no foul language should come from your mouth, but only what is good for building up someone in need, so that it gives grace to those who hear. So us as believer, we should be also following what God has been doing to us and for us. He has been speaking good things to us. We should be speaking good things to others. And one of the traits that Satan have is he pulls you away from God. He pulls you away from godly things. He pulls you away from prayer. He pulls you away from reading your word. He pulls you away from fasting. He pulls you with anything that involves he pulls you away from anything that involves God. That is what Satan is here to do. He pulls you to the flesh and he pulls you away from the spiritual life and pulls you into the flesh. That is what the devil likes to do. So if you start not to speak good things unto others, just know that sometimes that could be the devil pulling you away from God. Most of the time people think that as believers we're supposed to be composed, nice at all times, but we're also humans. And people forget about that. And people are always like, you don't act like a Christian. You don't act like you're a Christian because you are literally, you're mean and all that. They just think that as a Christian, you should be nice at all times. But sometimes people have to remember, just because I'm a Christian, I'm also a human being. And there is still that part of me that is still that flesh. That if you try me the wrong way, you're going to get another side of me. Like, people think because you're a Christian, you're nice at all times. But if you try me, you're going to get a different side of us. Because I'm progressing. I am literally in the works. I'm not perfect, but I'm almost there. If you try me the wrong way, maybe it's on a Monday or a Tuesday, you're going to get another side of me, and it ain't going to be cute, and it's not going to be Christian likely. And it's fine. It's fine for us as human beings, but also for us as believers to have those days. But one of the things that you cannot do is be consistent in those ways. You cannot be consistent in the ways of acting like the flesh. You cannot be consistent in those ways. Yes, today you might get angry. Yes, today you might have an attitude, but don't be consistent. Don't continue to have an attitude. Don't continue to get angry. You can have that one day. You can have 2 days, but you cannot have a whole week, a whole month of being angry and being rude and all those things. But we are humans. That is the one thing that we have to understand. And most of the times, if you pray about it and you ask God to lead you, everything is going to be all right. That's why we need God. That's why we need to hear his voice. That's why we need to obey his voice. Because if we don't obey his voice, we might think we're moving forward, but we're just in one circle. We're just going around in one circle, but we're not moving out of it. We're just staying in a revolving door. That's why they say it's important for us as believers to pray, to fast, to read our word, because the word gives us wisdom, y'all. It opens you to a new way. And we also have to ask God to open our eyes spiritually, because our physical eyes are not able to see what our spiritual eyes are able to see. Because spiritual eyes, when God opens your spiritual eyes, you're able to see more things and more clearly things, and you're able to have that knowledge of knowing, yes, this is God, no, this is Satan, yes, this is another spirit. And also we have to ask God to open our spiritual ears, because if we hear things and we might think it's God, but it's actually a different spirit. It could be a different spirit, because guess what? Satan knows the word. He knows the Bible. He knows the word. If he knows the word and you don't, and he tricks you into doing something that wasn't even God speaking to you, and you think it's God, that's how we start to fail. But even if that happens to you, even if you fail, don't stay down. Don't stay down. If you fall, you better get up and come back stronger than you were before, and come back with more knowledge that you had before. We can mistake Satan's voice as for God's voice, and it's not really God, and it's really Satan. So that's why we have to keep reading our Bibles, and not just reading our Bibles, but also meditating on the word and applying the words that we're reading, and also in prayer, and just having that sense of knowledge. When you have a sense of knowledge in your life, when you have that knowledge in your life, there's nothing that can tell you that you're not doing what you're supposed to do, as Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So if we don't understand the word, that's why it's important for us to go to church, because sometimes you go to church and you find people who are in the same situation that you are, and you all are able to help each other connect and into different things. And that's why it's important to meet in groups, to join youth groups, to join whatever groups churches have, like small groups, because it's important for all of us. We all want to go to heaven someday, but how will we know if we're doing the right things if we don't have that knowledge? And if you don't understand the word, you can't just stay in your room all day without even looking it up or even searching on YouTube for a sermon. If you don't, and if you're like that one person who's just like, oh, I don't like watching sermons, they're too long, well, you're never gonna get that sense of knowledge, because you cannot do all things by yourself. You need people. That's why Jesus had disciples. That's why sometimes we need that group, that small group. So they're there. When you fall, you have somebody who can pick you back up again. That's why we need a group. That's why we need people around us who are feeding themselves spiritually and not in the flesh. At the same time, our spirits have to align with their spirits, because not every small group is a small group of God. Not every church is a church of God. Not every community of Christ is a community of Christ. Some act like they are, but they're really not. So that's why we have to really pray about it and ask God for clarity in things that we're doing, in small groups that we're joining, because not everything is of God. Just because it says it's of God, that doesn't mean it's of God. There are false prophets, there are false church out here. So we have to be careful about that, but also that's why we have to pray about it, and God has to confirm it to us about a certain group, a certain church, a certain everything. That's why I say prayer is important, and reading the word is important, and understanding and having that knowledge is really, really important to each and every one of us.